But we look ahead to what's going to be a very exciting day as far as education, specifically for the class of 2022. Education Minister Angie Motshekga going to announce the outcome of the examinations today. How did everybody do? Earlier this week, Umalusi approved those 2022 results. There were some irregularities, they were identified, but Umalusi is saying it did not compromise the credibility and integrity of the results. Equal Education has commended the department as well for overcoming a lot of challenges. We'll talk to them in a second. Just to orientate your day, if you're one of those who wants to watch exactly what happens with the matric results announcement, taking a look at the Department of Basic Education's media statements. It's going to be a ministerial breakfast with the top achievers. That's this morning around 9 o'clock. I'm sure we'll have coverage of that for you. And then we get down to business later this evening. The program itself gets underway from 4 p.m. this afternoon, and then the program itself, as far as the results, from 6 p.m. tonight. So it's more of a technical briefing, really, from 4 p.m. The business end of the matric results is going to be getting underway from 6 p.m. this evening. Of course, that'll be live here on ENCA. Catherine Sutherland, researcher at Equal Education. Are we excited? Are we pessimistic? How are we feeling? Good morning.
For having me. We are cautiously optimistic. We know that this cohort of matrics is the largest cohort to date. We also know that they were the worst affected by COVID-19 because they had to do both their grade 10 and grade 11 years during rotational timetabling and with the massive learning losses. So we have acknowledged the massive effort put into catch-up programs and ensuring that learners can get to matric and feel ready. But yes, we are cautiously optimistic.
And when we talk about the cautious optimism as well, I suppose one could argue that even before COVID-19, there was always a question around the annual increase of matric pass rates, more specifically, Catherine, those who are eligible to go on for further study. And I understand it's not a fair comparison to go with the IEB and public schooling. It's just not a fair comparison. 12,000 pupils versus, I think it's close to 1 million, maybe correct me. But we still have what is considered a very low bachelor's entry from public schooling. And that's got to be an issue, isn't it?
So every year it does come up in terms of, the proportion of learners that are passing. We would definitely like to see more bachelor passes, absolutely. But I think when we look at the pass rate, we can tell whether we've done better than the previous year, not only by looking at the overall pass rate, but as you say, looking at the number of bachelor passes, but more importantly, perhaps even looking at the throughput rate, which is the proportion of learners who started grade 2 together and then 10 years later finished matric together. So in that sense, we're looking at more of a holistic perspective of whether learners are actually making it through school and what proportion of learners are making it through school. And then another thing to consider is what the proportion of matrics who are passing, what proportion of those matrics are in quintile 1 to 3 schools, which are under-resourced and low fee-paying schools. So in that sense, we kind of have to look at those sorts of measures rather than just the one bachelor pass number in order to get an understanding of whether we're moving forward.
And you took me very nicely to the resources at school, Catherine. I think you were reading my mind. I was going to go there next. And even though the organisation is called Equal Education, what you're fighting for is equal education. But let's not fool ourselves. It is unequal, just due to circumstance and the way the education system works in some parts of the country. It's not equal. And I imagine that's the fight you're looking for, isn't it? That's what you want to try and get right.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in the beginning of the year, there's, the placement of learners and the matric statement, or the matric results. And it's always, a good time to speak about basic education. But we're hoping that this conversation continues throughout the year and we really get to speak about and address the structural systemic issues that we see that fall outside of the matric results and placements. Because, as you said, it's an incredibly unequal system. And basic education is not a sector to take risks in because it has long-lasting impacts for everyone in the sector.
It certainly does, and as I mentioned before we started talking, if viewers only just joining us now, morning by the way, this is Catherine Sutherland from Equal Education. Remind you, it's going to be a big day. The business end of the releasing of the matric results is going to be underway from about 6 o'clock tonight. But as we know, Catherine, every year they're not going to dive headfirst into the provincial results and top achievers. We're going to hear from the Minister of Basic Education, sort of outlining what the last couple of years has been like and what the policy changes are, hopefully, for the next year or two. What do you want to hear from the Minister tonight as far as planning is concerned to address the issues that actually you just raised? What do you want to hear?
We would like to hear her focus on foundational learning. So foundational numeracy and literacy is incredibly important, and focusing more on just the proportion of matrics who actually made it there, but focusing on the learners who actually never end up making it to matric in the first place. And particularly interventions around that. And in terms of any intervention that could happen around foundational literacy and learning, we hope that it's targeted towards under-resourced, no-fee paying schools, so in an equitable way. We also hope that there's focus on infrastructure and the challenges that learners have had to face, because they have faced insurmountable odds to get here in the first place. So in terms of setting up plans to ensure that we minimize those challenges and do that very quickly, we hope that she focuses on solutions.
And I think if anyone's been following our coverage, especially with Ronald Masinda down in the Eastern Cape, again, one of the provinces where we're seeing schools only getting through 2 hours of class every day because they don't have running water. Then there's the blackouts, then there's the vandalism. So I'm personally very keen to hear what the plans are for the Eastern Cape. Catherine, just in closing, before I say goodbye to you, it's one thing to have a lot of matric pupils passing, possibly just scraping through, but I was one of those pupils that a pass is a pass. I'll take it. But it's the quality of the pass as well, especially two subjects that I'd like to just get your closing thoughts on. It's the number of matriculants who wrote maths and wrote science, A, and those who actually passed. It's an issue every year, the lack of high pass rates in maths and science, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, ideally, we would, love to have high quality passes throughout all subjects, especially in STEM subjects. They're very important. But we also have to understand that, not every learner would like to pursue a career or a life in STEM subjects. So we, obviously hope that the results are good for maths and science. But we would like to reiterate that there are also other options for learners who don't excel particularly well in those subjects, and those options are, absolutely okay. And yeah.
And I imagine, Catherine, you and I are going to speak in the coming days as well about those options, how important they are, and the kind of support that pupils need. Because just because you finished matric and the year has ended doesn't mean that your journey has ended. But Catherine, always great to have you with us. Looking forward to again in the next few days for reaction to what's going to be a very exciting day for many, many matriculants around the country. To remind you, as I say goodbye to Catherine Sutherland, the CEO research at Equal Education, the program for the matric results, 9 a.m. this morning. It's the ministerial breakfast. We see this every year with the top achievers, and then the key moment tonight, the numbers come out. That's what the country's going to be watching, all getting underway from about 6 o'clock.